ready for the second half. And Marcel's going to lead us off with some discussion on our standard details.
Hello. I've introduced myself, but I'll do it again. My name is Marcel Young-Scaggs. I work for MaineDOT in the highway program. I'm a designer, and I help kind of put these guys together. Before I continue, there were some questions over in the back corner, and I think Don's got a question for Teresa. If you want to.
Yeah, you're going to raise a question about how we measure slopes. We talked about on the ramps themselves, down the center, in the middle of slopes across. But sometimes the contractor may have a 4-foot smart level. DOJ may come out with a 2-foot level. You may get different results using a different level. Is there any protocol, rules of thumb?
Yeah, we're for our collectors that are out collecting, they're using 2-foot level. That's what the Department of Justice uses. It's 2-foot smart level. That's what the Department of Justice uses. They use them. That's what they bring. But we've used 4 as well. What we've been doing is kind of taking a 2-foot and a 4-foot, and in some places. But
should we be requiring a contractor to use it? Something when they're doing?
We haven't yet, and that's a good question. We should be, the people that we're inspecting our ramp, we've trained some people to do that, and we're going to be training more people who are going to be using them.
I guess the other thing to think about on some of these ramps that are 15 foot long, and you're using 2-foot level.
Right, yeah.
There's a lot of measurements on those.
That's right, and, we're getting there, we're figuring that one out. Wayne, any?
I mean, you probably don't want to hear it, but I didn't measure ramps in the middle. Whenever I designed them, I used kind of the points, and we were building out of concrete, and each flag was an individual plane, so it was pretty predetermined. You guys are dealing with a whole different animal
With asphalt, yeah, wonderful, yeah.
The personal experience there, I guess.
No, I agree, concrete is pretty, but with asphalt, it can be quite interesting. And it just comes down.
It is very interesting because when you're grading these, you have your 2% cross slope, but by the time the paving crew covers in, you probably don't have that, and that needs to be adjusted as before they pave it.
And my bigger concern lately is whether they use a level or not, and they should be using the level, put a level on it. So, yeah.
Excellent.
Good question.
Yeah. So before I kind of get into it, just by show of hands, who's seen or handled or dealt with the updated details before today? Excellent. So most of you guys have. That's good. All right. So I'm just going to bring us through them, go over some of the updates, some of the new things that are in the details, and I guess the goal is just familiarize ourselves with them, and so we're all kind of on the same playing field here. So starting at the beginning, in response to the increased attention to detail we need to have when we're constructing these, when we're designing these, when we're inspecting these, we've got more detailed notes than before. I'm not going to read through all of them. I'm going to point a couple of them out right now, but in your own spare time, it's good just to read these, be familiarized with these for the future. So starting with number 1, maximums and minimums do not have tolerances, and are not to be exceeded or unmet. So we've been, they're coming around now.
They're coming around, sorry, I was.
This is something we've been kind of hammering, so again, there's no tolerances here. You either met them or you haven't. So if you got 8.5% and you need 8.33%, that's not acceptable. So that's something to consider. And if you're really worried about it, there should be some conversation about putting in some conservative slope if you're really concerned about it.
Yeah, we could be flatter than 8.3.
Yeah.
Absolutely,
Yeah.
the maximum.
Yeah. Number 4, textual warning shall span the width of the pedestrian ramp. See standard detail 60802. So this is something that we're getting a lot better at, but we're still not all the way there. We need to have our detectable warning span the entire width. If we have our concrete cast in place detectable warnings, then we have in 60802 we have a 4-inch buffer that we can put in there. But if you're just doing like the peel and stick or something like that, then try to span it, we should span it all the way across. Note 6, the ramp with the running slope less than 5% is defined as a blended transition. Blended transitions do not require level landing at the top of the ramp. See 801.26 for details. So, this, I'm gonna get into this in a little more detail, but it's an option that we can use if we're having a tough situation. Number 7, the ramp length should not exceed 15 feet. Adjust ramp length or slope as needed to provide access to the maximum extent feasible. See 801.03 for details. We've been talking about this, and 801.03 has our table that we're going to use. I'll go into that in more detail as well. Note 13, a temporary pedestrian access route shall be provided whenever the existing pedestrian access route in the public right-of-way is blocked by construction, alteration, maintenance, or other temporary conditions. Refer to MUTCD for guidance. So this is something that we're getting better at as well, but we're probably not all the way there. It's just a reminder, we need to be able to provide access that has to be acceptable whenever we're doing construction, maintenance, other things like that. If there's any questions as I'm going through this, yeah, just raise your hand, interrupt me.
Just a quick question,
Yep.
I probably should ask it.
Yeah.
So the technical warning deal, so when we're talking about 4 inches on the side,
Yeah.
typically we have ramp openings 5, 6 feet, and most technical warning plates are either, 2x2s or 2x3s. And so if you have that 4 inches on the side, then either you gotta extend, you gotta have like 6-8 inch opening, or you have like 2 inches on either side outside of that concrete. I guess how people can handle that.
I know that, in the past, I've had them cut it. You can cut a plate
Yeah.
and then put them in. They've got different sizes. You said have you seen like 2x3s? They have 2x3s.
2x2,
Yeah.
4x30.
Yeah. Yeah, you can utilize those. Also, if you want to, if you're a designer and you're really thinking that far ahead, you can maybe want to think about that and create an opening that's that size. But does that answer your question?
Yeah.
Or does anybody else have anything else to input with that?
Yeah, the opening doesn't have to match the width of the crosswalk, right?
No.
I mean, maybe I think that's in the past, maybe what we thought when we were up there. Look, try to make everything match, that isn't necessarily what's more important.
All right, so this next slide here, we have our pedestrian ramp requirements. You've seen this, these are here, this is in the guidance. This is just a quick one-stop shop, go-to sheet. If you're not familiar with some things, you're not familiar with the requirements, you can find them here. For example, if you're just not familiar with the turning space, or if you have someone who's not familiar with the turning space, you can bring them here, hey, turning space, it corresponds to letter F. Here's where it's supposed to be, and what are the requirements? It needs to be 4 by 4 feet with a maximum slope of 2% in any direction, may include detectable warning. So it has just a quick one-stop shop for most of the things that you need right there. So here is our ramp length table. So in order to use this table, you need to know 2 things. You need to know what your curb reveal, what curb reveal you want, and you also need to know the profile, the roadway profile grade. And it really, it's not just the profile grade, but also when you're coming into intersections and you're doing funky stuff, you're trying to blend a profile of one road with profile of another road, you really need to be considering also the gutter line grade. So what's the grade of the gutter line right there? So once you have those 2 things, then you can determine what ramp length you may need. So, for example, if you have a roadway that's sloping at 3% and you want a 7-inch curb reveal, just come down to the sheet. We have 3% roadway, 7-inch curb reveal, and we need 12-foot ramp length. Additionally, that's on the high side. So on the low side, you have 3%, 7-inch curb reveal, need an 8-foot ramp. Each one of these lengths also has got a bit of it's a bit conservative, but if you're really sure what your grades are. If something's amiss, then, you can use this equation down here at the bottom, and just think about, providing something that's more conservative, so that you know that you can match, the slope, know that you can get the slope that you need, to provide an accessible ramp. Also, we've got all these different lengths in here, right? How do you pay for them? We've already talked about this, so I'll bring it up again. We're gonna be moving towards paying for them by the length foot. One other thing to mention is that, we have a maximum of 15, but also there's times where you can use a 4-foot length in order to, meet the grade that you need. So that's something to consider as well. This is a new thing that we're bringing in. Are there any questions concerning this? There's generally been some questions in the past. Yes?
May not be correct, really. With parallel plans.
Yeah.
So I look at the landing area and the domes, that can match the profile grade of the road.
Yeah. Yeah, in this situation it could, but if you've got a situation where you have, well, I'll go into it, a ramp that's, kind of diagonal coming out the corner, call it option 3, then that's not gonna be, directly related to the roadway profile, so, yeah. Any other questions? All right, we're gonna keep going. All right, so, these next few slides that we have, they're all, they look pretty, they're all symmetrical, but we know that in the field, it's not necessarily gonna be the case. We're gonna have some things that don't look pretty and symmetrical like this, but these notes are supposed to just be a guidance, a guideline to help us, help the contractors, help everyone move forward and try to choose a design that's gonna work, and it's gonna be accessible. And using these notes with other resources that we've presented, we should be able to come together, as a team and make an accessible ramp. Also, each one of these ramps has kind of 2 configurations. We have a perpendicular configuration and a parallel configuration. This is an example of a perpendicular configuration here, and then this would be more of a parallel configuration. So, parallel configurations work well with narrow sidewalks. We have a lot of those, so you're probably gonna use a lot of those, a lot of that configuration. And these perpendicular configurations only really are useful for large, wide sidewalks or areas where you have bump outs and things like that. So here's option 1. Option 1 is our go-to option whenever feasible. So it provides 2 separate ramps for each direction, which is something that we want to move forward with as much as possible. And if you can see this, we've got our radius of our curve right here, and each ramp is on the tangent section of the radius. It is on the tangent section, not on the radius. Even though this is our go-to option, these take up a lot of space. So if you can imagine this as being a 10-foot radius, then you can be creating a crosswalk that's 18 feet down the road, which could cause sight distance problems, right? Or if you are trying to reconstruct this up a side road, you could be going 30 feet more or more up a side road just to create an accessible landing. And sometimes that's not in our scope of work. So when this option doesn't work for you, we've got option 2. So this is the second option that we have, and this option, what it does is it brings our ramps together by placing them either partially or fully within that radius. So the thing about this though is that if you do that, sometimes you might have, and we kind of talked about this before, Adley brought this up earlier, we have the opportunity for this point here, right here, the curve reveal might not be as much as 7 inches that we want. So we can come down, like I said before, down to 3 inches. So this is an example of that option 2, and you see this section of the ramp is in the tangent, so this section is in the radius, right? And then this next slide, the whole entire ramp here is in the radius. And then we have our option 3 ramps. So these aren't what we want necessarily because there's only one ramp for 2 different directions, but there's a lot of these out here and a lot of these out in the streets, and then it's just sometimes it's impractical, it's unfeasible to make 2 separate ramps, 2 separate landings. So option 3 is there for people to use as well. As a side note, just be sure to provide a 4x4 clear space corner for particular ramps so that, pedestrians have a safe spot. I'm just gonna keep going. Is there any questions?
On the, top side of the ramp on that last detail, that 4-foot min, should we aim for 5 if we're up against the building?
Yeah. Yeah, so that's gonna be, I think it's in the guidance, but if you've got an obstruction on the top, then you need to have, it needs to be 4x5 instead of just 4x4. And I saw another hand up back there.
4-foot tip down, what do you generally do? Drop your wheel on your curb to make that work?
Yeah, you have to drop your wheel. I mean, so you're talking about, like one of these two examples, right? So, you could, so say, you have to drop this down in order to meet the proper grade here. So you might be able to reach, on the back side, you might be able to have 8.33% or 7% or whatever. But then on this front side, because you're traveling a greater distance, you're gonna have a steeper slope. So that, in order to meet that requirement over the 7 inches, you might not make it over 7 inches, so you're gonna have to drop that middle point right there. Is that a little more clear?
I think so, yeah.
Okay. Yeah, let me know if it's not, I can kind of try to.
I'm not sure if I'm clear enough to tell you whether you're clear or not.
We can talk after, we can talk after as well, right?
The table has it in there, so too, to get the 4 doors.
Yeah. Yeah, are you kind of, let's go back to the table. Here we go. Are you kind of referencing just trying to, where we put these 4-foot tip downs?
Yeah,
Or- Yeah, so the 4-foot tip down, so, I mean, if you're just looking at, there's a certain point where, you can meet the grade, you can come up 8.33% and not need 8 feet to do so, you can do it in 4 feet. So that gives you an opportunity to use a shorter tip down or tip up, or however you want to say it, in order to make that grade. So it just gives you the opportunity to use less.
Right.
Which could be helpful.
Thanks.
And whether it's actually curb reveal on top too.
This,
I think it's that 4
this,
or something.
sometimes you would, like if you want a 5-inch reveal and you're at -3%, then yeah, you can do that, but even if you got a steep enough grade, you can use the 4-foot and then have it, and still get your 7-inch reveal as well, so it just depends on the situation.
We don't have a low side.
Yeah.
It says.
Yeah, it's gonna be on the low side, except if you're really got a low, reveal there, so. Good stuff. Any other questions for kind of, yeah?
Should we tend to stick with the 8 feet if there's not like site constraints?
I'm gonna go that to one of you guys. Should we stick with 8 feet? Unless there's some site restraints.
Well, I think for the most part, if you're sticking with a normal 7-inch reveal, which is desirable,
Yeah.
then this is really only one extreme case where you're allowed to use 4. So I think 8 is what you're gonna see most cases.
Mm-hmm.
You have a situation where you can go 4 and that helps you to reduce an impact or something, that would be acceptable.
Okay.
So yeah, I would shoot for the 8. And for the most part, you're gonna have to use 8 if you've got normal full curve review.
Yeah.
So here we have our side street ramp. So this is a ramp where there is no sidewalk continuing on the street that we're gonna be crossing. So one thing I wanna point out is the placement of our detectable warning fields here. So if, and this is all spelled out in the detail, but if, you have a distance between, if the distance between your grade break and your gutter line is less than or equal to 5 feet, then your detectable placement can be placed just across the path of travel like such. However, if you're greater than 5 feet, if the distance between your grade break and your gutter line is greater than 5 feet, then you need to span the entire width of the crosswalk like such. This example shows a straight line all the way across, which is acceptable. You can also do, you can also follow the arc of the curve, arc of the gutter line as well. A modified option 3 could work here as well, besides this configuration. So here we have this configuration that we see up here, but if you have option 3 ramp on this side, but instead of having this sit down here and this sidewalk, this is kind of just scribbled on out, you can have this tip down, and then you have this area there too. So that could work as well.
So the question at break, what's the slope of that section that's either less than 5 feet or greater than 5 feet? What's the slope of that allowance?
You should follow the profile grade there. So whatever the grade is of the street that's going across, we should follow that.
But it is also a path of travel, if that's, try to get it. That's the crosswalk really, should be, but sometimes you can't.
You can have them match whatever you got coming down. And then it traces full preservation.
So we have our island crossings here. So for our flush crossings, we want to be using our type 5 curve through them. And we've gone over this again, but just go over it, just getting it in our brains, I guess. If we're going to be putting detectable detectables in our crossing, we need to make sure that we have at least 6 feet wide crossing. Additionally, if it's less than 6 feet, then we don't want to place them there. Also, sometimes this could be 6 feet or more, and we don't want our pedestrians to stop. So if we don't want to stop there, don't place the detectables there, have them go through, but then you have to consider your crossing time. Do we have enough time in the signal phasing to get the pedestrian all the way across? And if you want to put the pedestrian there, then consider APS system, RFP, something like that. And here's our blended transition. So just like we said before, blended transitions are curb ramps where the slope here is 5% max, and they don't need a turning space at the top. So these really only work with large, wide sidewalks with large openings as well. This is something that we don't really want to see all the time, because we really like having that space up top for people to travel. But this can be used if there's some constraints that you can't get around. And we got a really good example that Ray's going to talk about later with blended transition. And if you're going to use this, just talk to your lead designer, talk to Teresa, just get people involved, and it'll be all right.
Why not?
Why not? Any questions? Any additional questions?